When you're young, all you look forward to is growing up and being free. I look back now and realize that we never knew the true cost of our freedom.
At this time, our friendship had blossomed, and we're like, hey, your voice is incredible. Like, come over to our band if you want to try out.
My band would play with his band every once in a while, and then just kind of came to be.
He worked at Clearwater, and we used to play there every other week. So I got to know Gene pretty well.
He had like this big brother kind of effect on me, you know, where I kind of looked up to him in that way. It's like, I wish I could be like that, you know?
You looked at him as like a grumpy dude, you know, but then you got to know him, and he was just like the kindest, you know, gentlest kind of guy that I've ever met.
He was the front man. He was the show.
Even when you were sad, he would try to pick you up because, you know, we were brothers.
No one can be happy all the time. Like, you know, there's days you're sad and days you're upset, but like Gene was always happy. So when I look back at it, I'm like, almost should have been like something's not right. I don't know if you're just like putting like a front.
Just because someone looks happy doesn't mean that they're happy inside, and I think that was the case with Gene.
The thing with people that suffer from depression is they're the best ones to hide it.
He was on like 50 different medications, and he just kept getting misdiagnosed.
Oh, you're feeling that way? Well, I got this one that won't make you feel that way, but it'll make you feel this way, so you can take this other thing. It's like, anyone with common sense realizes that would fuck you up.
When you feel numb, it's kind of hard to express yourself. It's hard to just communicate.
He had a big community of friends and going to shows and all that stuff, and then that's kind of taken away because of your work schedule, and that's how you make your money.
People kind of just grew apart, and I don't think that's something he ever wanted, and I don't think he necessarily knew or had the means to kind of get people back together except to like go to a show or something like that.
Sometimes just as humans, you just need time to breathe, and I don't think he was given that, you know, to really find himself, like you were mentioning. Like, you have to have time to sit and reflect and think about that.
On May 22nd, 2015, Gene took his own life. He broadcasted his intents to the world over social media.
It was a hard day, you know, to find out that your best friend kind of took his own life, and there was nothing you could do about it.
It just didn't feel like a real day. It felt fake. It felt like I was gonna wake up from this dream. Never really did.
It's upsetting to think about. I don't like talking about it because I wish I was talking to him about it.
He didn't want to go back. He can't do the medication anymore. He doesn't want to be in a hospital, you know, for X amount of time while he's doing all that stuff. He just didn't want to do it anymore.
Someone that like passes the way that he did, it's already made up in their mind. Because if you ever tied a noose, it is a very long, arduous process.
You know, I didn't get that last chance to just physically see him, just be able to put my hand on his shoulder or something like that.
I wish we could have talked, and I got to say my goodbye. But I won't get that. So.
At Gene's benefit show, we all got together for the first time in years. Instead of aspiring musicians and idealistic youths, I saw a group of broken people whose freedom had turned against them. The room reeked of anger, frustration, and confusion. Whatever visions of themselves people had, they had been reduced to rubble.
To be honest, it's one of my favorite tours I think we've ever done so far, and the crowd response is like overwhelming every night.
2 months after Gene's passing, another friend of our music circle said his farewell on Facebook. Weeks later, his body was found. After the news had come out about Justin, there was one question that stayed on my mind. With all the advantages and innovations my generation has had, I wonder why depression, anxiety, and suicide were so prevalent among us. I decided to take a closer look at the lives of millennials and the challenges that our generation faces, in order to get a better picture of our situation and the aspects that define us.
Ding, 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 ding. There he sits inside your local coffee shop, sporting a man bun and facial hair. Somehow he believes, although he has no job, that by his 30s he will be a millionaire. Millennial, gotta love millennials.
Millennials have overtaken us, and I know this because a 20-year-old staff member read it to me from the internet.
A lot of them are entitled, self-centered, don't have a strong work ethic, motivation.
A hopeless generation of lazy, emasculated ne'er-do-wells.
We do have a generation that I think we have raised with a great degree of entitlement.
They were told that they were special all the time. They were told that they could have anything they wanted.
This particular generation was 3 times more narcissistic than previous generations.
When I was a kid, trophies had meaning. You only got one of these things if you were good at something. But these days, kids get trophies for participating.
Come on, millennials. I know we things up for you, but we were counting on you to fix things, not finish the job.
I think the real millennials are a bit different than this.
I think the most challenging part is getting different generations to understand you.
Other generations see millennials as somehow entitled or that they don't really want to work hard.
The biggest problem right now is that the fact that no one believes in us. No one believes that we can actually really do something.
We are stressed about our lives, even if it's more peaceful than in the previous centuries.
I think the most challenging part about being a millennial is just trying to break that stigma that millennials are just this unimportant age group that is seemingly cast aside.
Not all millennials are broke, unemployed, living in their parents' basement among a collection of participation trophies they've never earned. That's a bunch of craziness propagated by people who are trying to convince you to pay attention to them. Move past the myths about millennials and start to think about really what's happening with millennial culture.
I've wondered a lot why there's so many negative stereotypes about emerging adults, since I've not found any of them to be true. They're not lazy. They're often working at minimum wage jobs for a long time as they try to find something better, as well as going to school. They're accused of being selfish. Absolutely untrue in my experience. They're very idealistic about doing good for others.
I think the millennials are very creative, very unique, and have a lot of potential. Sometimes I think they don't believe that about themselves because the messages tend to be pessimistic.
Let's stop and rewind for a minute. What exactly makes a person a millennial? The most commonly agreed upon time frame for millennials being born is 1982 to 2004. In 2016, the numbers of adult millennials surpassed the baby boomers with the huge number of 75 million people in America alone. By 2018, millennials will account for 36% of the U.S. workforce, and they will eclipse baby boomers in spending power at over $3 trillion.
We call them the millennial generation.
When we saw a sudden change in people's attitude toward divorce, toward family, towards structure and discipline in schools, a rethinking of many of the assumptions and the educational experiments that went wrong,
Well, when I first began studying 18 to 29-year-olds in the early 1990s, I chose it mainly because I was about that age at the time myself, and I thought it was a really interesting period of life that psychology basically had overlooked. That they weren't just living a prolonged adolescence, but they weren't really young adults either. They were very unsettled. That's how I decided to propose that it's really a new life stage.
If we think about this from an evolutionary perspective, these individuals have to adapt very quickly to an environment that is changing by the minute. You may have a very comfortable lifestyle. You have food to eat, you have a roof over your head, you have friends, you have family that love and support you, and yet there's this feeling, this nagging feeling of something's missing or something could go wrong, and how do I really know that I'll be okay?
One of the early surprises was the responses to this question, do you feel like you've reached adulthood? I thought that'd be a pretty simple yes or no question. But actually most people didn't answer yes or no. They said, well, I'm an adult in some ways, and they'd explain how, and then they'd say, but I'm not an adult in other ways. Even in the early 1990s, the trend had already started toward longer and longer education, later and later marriage age, later and later age of having your first child, and those trends have continued to go in the same direction over the last 25 years.
Millennials want to take in everything life has to offer. And if I get tied up in a relationship with my house and my car and stuff that comes with mortgages and expenses, then that can tether me down. I think that millennials who have yet to start families see some of these traditional things getting more and more expensive in urban markets, and they say, okay, I could be happy without that, and then have more disposable time and money to do things, activities, experiences that I want to do.
For their grandparents, you just went to work, you found a job, work wasn't supposed to be fun. You did it because you had to support a family. And marriage, you didn't expect to find your soulmate. You just wanted to find someone who would be a partner in life and be a source of love and companionship. Grandparents, and to some extent parents, see their kids really not interested in getting married in their early or mid, sometimes even their late 20s. And they think, well, that's not like I experienced it. I was already married and had 2 kids by the time I was 25. I mean, that was true of most of their grandparents. And my 25-year-old grandson and 27-year-old granddaughter don't seem to have any interest in that at all. And it's easy to jump from that to there must be something wrong with them, because the way I did things was obviously the right way.
The millennials today, especially young adults in their 20s and 30s, you know, that's a time in anyone's life where there can be a lot of uncertainty because a lot of change happens in your 20s. You graduate from college, you may find your first job, you may get married. That's a lot for anyone, in anyone's lifetime, for changes to happen. And so you compound that with a world that is constantly changing on you, where changes across the world really impact you now in a much more immediate way than they may have 50, 60 years ago. People from each generation have less amount of certainty in trying to predict how their life will pan out.
From a national survey I directed, about 3/4 of them said that this time of my life is stressful. They agreed with that statement. And again, you can understand the various sources of that. It's stressful to be having to figure out what you're going to do with your life. It's stressful to be working in a job that doesn't pay much money, which is true for almost all of them, for most of their 20s. It's stressful to feel like you can't do the things that you want to do because you don't have any money.
These children entered adulthood Finding safety in authority figures, many people argued that parents were being overly cautious and hindering the emerging adults' abilities to function as individuals.
Are we too much of helicopter parents?
We are. In my book, I talk about the 3 types of overparenting. We're overprotective, we are providing way too much direction, and we're doing a lot of hand-holding, or what I call concierging our kids. And we're undercutting their chances to be self-actualized, competent, capable, confident adults.
They were the first generation where there might have been a little bit too many hands-on approaches to different things in their lives, to parenting, essentially. How you're parented and what the culture of parenting is in a particular society says a lot about, what people's resources will be and internal resources and competence.
In the early 1980s, on top of a surging crime wave, there was an alarming increase in child murders and abductions. Parents saw this as a need to supervise and shelter their increasingly vulnerable children.
Take a close look at the picture we're going to put up on the screen. This is Eitan Pate.
He was never seen again. Doucette, a karate instructor, had abducted 11-year-old Jody Plauché several weeks earlier.
Prosecutors say the Ammarals, while running a daycare center, photographed 4- and 5-year-old children naked, raped them, and tortured them.
Babies are to be protected. We see baby on board bumper stickers everywhere, and people think that children must be given a better national mission and must be given structure as children.
I think our attitudes as adults that we're really not as caring for children as we should be, and we're not protecting kids to the extent that they should be protected.
If you want to protect that child from unnecessary exposure to inappropriate material, you sometimes need a little help.
You do understand a parent's anxiety about sending their kid to a concert.
I am talking about pervasive messages that are available to kids of any age that are explicit and violent.
85% of the teenagers in high school in Western Europe have been exposed to hardcore Satanism.
Most of your self-styled Satanists, your dabblers, drugs, heavy metal music, role-playing games, animal mutilations.
The drug dealers need to know that we want them out of our schools, neighborhoods, and our lives.
What we're doing, my purpose of being here is to let these kids know and the parents know that they can. The ultimate is death, and that's what we suffered.
If we plucked someone from 1960s or 1970s and put them in today's world, would they respond in a similar manner? Developmentally, we are reaching milestones earlier in today's younger generation than we were before. Kids are talking faster, walking faster. They're reaching those milestones quicker.
Please. Can.
Because the species is adapting. You take a 2-year-old and hand them an iPad, and they may not have all the verbal capacities developed yet, but they can pull up a nursery rhyme on YouTube and play it for you. Our ways of learning have shifted over time. Our ways of receiving information, input, and the output, how we present the information, has also changed in accordance with what we've seen happen in the last 30 years.
Parents of millennials sort of were the first people to really start being able to access the internet. Millennials are like the first real internet group, having access to, what you should and shouldn't be doing at all times. How many activities they should be involved in, how many sports. Gymnastics, do you like try to encourage a well-rounded child? You want a well-rounded child. The more information people have, the more they sort of question what they already know. So maybe they already know how to parent, but maybe they don't think it's enough because of things that they see other people doing with their kids. And when parents doubt themselves, children doubt themselves.
They're very in touch with their feelings, and they prize the idea of being in touch with feelings, whereas perhaps in previous generations that was frowned upon or deemed as a weakness, essentially.
Nobody was thinking about those kind of things, setting up a mental health safety net for people back in the days that they were telling everyone that they were all wonderful and all gifted. And some of this is nobody's fault because it's unexplored territory.
Maybe they didn't have the options to make decisions for themselves before. Maybe they just went into the same line of work as their parents did or their grandparents did. Or maybe they did the same line of work, or they studied in school what their friends did, but it may not be their strength.
if you are used to getting a trophy and you are used to being acknowledged as a winner, when it comes down the road that there aren't as many jobs out there and it is more competitive and you may suffer rejection, if I was somebody who always got a trophy and then all of a sudden I wasn't getting accepted at all of these places for a job, I would probably suffer from some element of rejection or depression. And it's understandable that that's an issue that the millennials have been having.
Parents who love their kids, who want the best for them, tend to be a little bit more pushy in terms of what the standard looks like.
You know, in the West, we have a more individualist society. You know, there's this idea that everyone has to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and that anyone can make it if they try really hard. Whereas in other cultures that are more collectivist, the focus is still more on group and what's best for the group rather than what's best for the individual.
We have this unfortunate narrative in American society now that there's something wrong with you if you rely on your parents in your 20s. I don't know where that comes from, because in virtually all cultures throughout all of human history, family members have relied on each other throughout life. And I don't know why we now think that if you're in your 20s and you need to move home for a while, or you like talking to your parents or Skyping with them or texting them every day, there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. It's a perfectly normal human desire to have the support of your family members.
Kids start to sort of doubt themselves when they can't achieve that standard and, you know, feel guilty. I'm disappointing my parents. I'm not going to amount to what I should amount to, because there's so much comparison happening in these newer generations. It really fuels this black and white thinking, which can be damaging long term. And obviously there's a lot of ways to combat that, but you know, I think that the more people think in black and white, the less self-compassion that they can have for themselves.
It's a consequence of having to grapple with these big questions about what you're going to do with your life. Those can be difficult questions, especially if you have trouble answering them. And so they sometimes get depressed or anxious about not being able to find the right answers.
Culturally, we are just sort of a little bit more on edge. We all have much more anxiety and depression than ever before.
About 1/3 of 18 to 29-year-olds agree with the statement, "I often feel depressed." And over half of them agree with the statement, "I often feel anxious."
When you are diagnosed with a mental illness of some kind, sometimes that can become the biggest part of your identity. And then you forget about all the other parts of your identity and all the things that you can do really well. Millennials who graduate college are looking to find themselves. They're looking to figure out the next step. Sometimes it's grad school, sometimes it's finding a job. Either way, they're trying to figure out what the next step is. A lot of millennials are sort of like, well, I guess now that I'm done school, I need to find the love of my life, you know, and this has to happen fast because there's a trajectory of when I'm supposed to do these things. Maybe there was a little bit of micromanaging by schools, by parents, by just the culture of like, this is what you're supposed to do. And so they might even graduate college and still not have an idea of what they want to do. Parents of millennials, I really would encourage to just get to know your child. Not as a child, but as an adult. You know, you've known them as a child. You know what their strengths are. You know what their weaknesses are. And I would say that the biggest aid for millennials or for any child who's suffering from anxiety or depression, bipolar disorder, whatever challenges the child's having, you know, is basically looking at what their strengths are and reminding them of those.
As the pressures of modern life become more and more overwhelming, many young adults have turned to prescription drugs as a means to cope. For the first time in history, abuse of opiates and other potent prescription drugs has overtaken the abuse of hard street drugs. This accounts for a staggering 45% of drug overdose deaths in 2010 from prescriptions, more than heroin, cocaine, and meth combined. The strength and addictiveness of these drugs has steadily increased over the years, and in 2007, the DEA found that the pain reliever fentanyl was nearly 50 times as physiologically potent as heroin. Millennials were succumbing more and more to the epidemic of painkillers. Less than 8% of previous generations were prescription abusers, but that number jumps to over 12% for today's emerging adults. With pharmaceutical and prescription drug overdoses causing more deaths in recent years than both car crashes and firearms, our generation finds itself on the verge of a crisis with no short-term solution. I think everybody's world changed with the internet. My friends became more interesting online than in real life. It started with AIM, then that led to Friendster, who I had forgotten about until the director of this movie reminded me of. Being in a band, my favorite was MySpace. This was the #1 social network where you could connect, promote, and share your music with everyone. Zuckerberg would eventually come along and single-handedly destroy MySpace. Another social media outlet started popping out of the woodwork. If you didn't write huge blogs to express yourself, you could now do it in 140 characters. And if you wanted to entertain a group of your friends, you could just take a picture and then wipe it away. It all started as ways to gossip, but progressed into an integral part of people's lives. Nowadays, there's a social network for everything. If you want to share cooking recipes, you have Pinterest. If you want to sell your handmade work, you have Etsy. If you're looking for updates on the latest trends, you have Reddit. If you're looking for a job, you can post your resume on LinkedIn. If you want a classified listing, you have Craigslist. If you hated the way your restaurant cooked your asparagus, or if you found hair in your bathtub at your last hotel, you can tell everyone on Yelp or TripAdvisor. If you're looking for love, you can go on OkCupid. Or if you're looking for something a little less than love, you can go on Tinder. If you want to be a DIY star, you can become a YouTube sensation. If you want to blog about the latest social injustice, you have Tumblr. Now everyone has a voice.
The internet has, obviously a lot of pros and cons. I think in the way our society functions now, we can't go without it.
By and large, I think millennials recognize that there are more choices available to me. And with a modest investment of my time, I can do research that no generation could ever have done before, to look behind the tent and see if the company's claims are true, to see if their beliefs align to my values. And I think there are an awful lot of millennials who are conscious capitalists.
That's a really important change to recognize. That's what really distinguishes this generation now of emerging adults from 25 years ago. The internet just began in 1991, so it was still really fresh at that time. People were beginning to use it. It wasn't a part of life the way it is now.
It's not a smartphone. Any consumer or business person understands it's a modern-day Swiss Army knife, and that's how they're going to use it. So I can crowdsource information on buying a car. I don't have to have a Kelley Blue Book. I can also get information on baby food, which might be very inexpensive, but important to me as a new parent. So I'm used to using this Swiss Army knife to gather information from my peer network, and I trust my peer network often more than I trust traditional sources of information.
But it does sort of come at a cost. When millennials grow up, or when people grow up, even people who aren't millennials, the internet also creates a space for everyone to share how they're feeling online, right? What they're experiencing, what they're into. When there is a constant looking at what people are interested in and how people are feeling about a certain event or a certain topic, even like what they're doing in their lives.
Because the truth is, if I have an amazing experience today and it doesn't go on my Instagram account, did the experience even exist?
Being able to see what everyone else is doing in their lives, which by the way is just a little piece of what they're doing in their lives. It's the piece they want to share. But to people who are viewing all of this, it can seem like it's everything. There's that comparison of like, what am I doing? What am I interested in? What am I going to become? And I think that can be damaging. That's the damaging part of having access to everybody's thoughts and feelings on the internet.
10 years ago, only 7% of American adults regularly used social media. Now that number has exploded to 65%. That's not just millennials, that's every generation. While 90% of young adults use social media, the number of older generations taken to the internet has grown exponentially.
I think it's really important to understand millennial influence. Millennials are influencing so many trends in this country, from what goes on in work and work-life balance to consumer trends. And when I talk about consumer trends, I'm talking about everything from food culture to technology culture to travel trends. Millennials are influencing people who are older than them, not just other millennials. And so we're seeing significant shifts based on millennial influence in terms of the aspirations they have and in terms of what people should expect from brands that provide goods and services.
Social media has taken root so deep that 1/3 of the entire planet has some form of social media outlet. We spend so much time facing a computer or phone, we forgot the human impact of connecting with one another physically and emotionally. A generation glued to their phones expressing themselves through their photos, statuses, pins, or how many upvotes they get.
We've created an environment of unlimited information. The latest studies of how often an adult will pull out his or her smartphone and look at it during the course of the day, it's about 160 times, which works out to about once every 6 minutes during your waking life.
Gallup took a poll in 2001, and every average American said that they had 10 really close friends. The same poll this year said we had 2.
Not only am I okay without social media, but I think I'm actually better off. I think I'm happier. I think I find more sustainability in my life, and I think I've been more successful professionally because I don't use social media.
They're just tobacco farmers and T-shirts, selling an addictive product to children. Because let's face it, checking your likes is the new smoking.
It's easy for those of us in the tech business to only focus on the positives, which are making people closer, making it easier to communicate, making the world a smaller place. But we've also, in some ways, made people more lonely. We've created a world in which the usage of these technologies has become almost invasive.
A 13-year-old girl has been forced to move schools after a bully posted fake nude photos of her on Facebook.
Investigators in Alamance County have arrested half a dozen students on charges of cyberbullying.
Last year, 13-year-old Megan Meyer hanged herself after getting emails from a boy she thought had jilted her.
The 6th grader committed suicide last week. Authorities say she suffered nearly a year of cyberbullying.
Certain people have used social media to its full potential and have raised awareness to a lot of civil liberties that wouldn't have gotten the acknowledgement that they deserved and that were ignored by news outlets.
That was really cold.
When I looked at this Facebook status my friend Alicia had put together, it really resonated with me.
So we could just organize on Twitter. We could say like meet here and like sort of use codes and stuff like that to mobilize thousands of people in St. Louis and across the country.
Really, all you need to have a protest in this day and age is an event on Facebook.
Weapons of the activists of the so-called Arab Spring weren't guns and bombs, but the internet.
A unique filmed record now exists, charting the downfall of tyrants in Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya.
Everything in life has its pros and cons, and although it may seem we've become more disconnected with our immediate world, we now have access to things that we never had before. But the success of millennials is still being shaped by previous generations. Knowledge is defined as the skills and information that transfer over into the real-world success through experience or education. However, the education aspect is letting us down, and we're only realizing it as we as individuals fail.
Over the last 2 decades, the cost of college has doubled. It's actually more than doubled.
The less good colleges are like the subprime lenders, where people are being conned into thinking that this credential is the one thing you need to do better in life. And they're actually not any better off after having gone to college. They typically are worse off.
If you think of college as opening doors after graduation, the debt closes those doors.
But the question we're asking this morning, is college really worth it?
In 1950, only 12.5% of the U.S. college-age population went to college. By 2015, the number would go up to 65%. College enrollment jumped from 13 million students in 2000 to 17 million in 2014. And by 2025, the number is expected to go up to 20 million.
With technology having changed the way it has, industry has changed in many different ways. And so in the olden days, somebody who grew up in a plumbing family would go to plumbing school and they'd learn how to do plumbing, and that was how they got educated. Today, technology has changed so much of the business world, so much of the manufacturing world, that the old way of educating students doesn't seem to apply as much.
I think it's important for people to understand that college education, post-secondary education or training of some kind is really crucial to success in the modern world. And yes, it's expensive. And in many ways, at least in some institutions, more expensive than it ought to be.
I mean, it used to be that a high school degree would get you some level of entry-level job. Now you need a college degree because given that there is competition, most employers would look for somebody who has the discipline, who's demonstrated the discipline, has demonstrated the drive to go and get that additional education. So high school degrees no longer are sufficient for much of any position these days of anything other than minimum wage. I have every expectation that the prevalence of master's degrees will continue to grow, and the fact that people have the determination and the drive to go get a master's degree will be viewed at the same level as what getting a bachelor's degree was 20 years ago.
When we are hiring, for positions, given what we do here in terms of marketing, marketing strategy, marketing research, and then activation of marketing programs, we almost always would require a degree. The college degree would be price of admission just to be considered because there are going to be so many other applicants who have a degree. And if we're trying to do data science work, it'd be pretty hard to compete. You could be self-taught expert in data sciences, but you'd have to be one heck of a statistician, to compete against someone on our team who already has a PhD in statistics.
Given that there is technology change, I suspect a lot of that will then transition into educating people on how to use that new technology in whatever their workplace is, whether it's dentistry, whether it's finance, whether it's movie production. That will be the norm. Re-education will become part of the standard. Every class you take has to have a purpose, and every class has to fit in terms of what your forward-looking career path is going to be. The consumer, the student, has to be smarter about what they're getting themselves into. And I'm not sure that all colleges are helping students make intelligent decisions because colleges are desperate.
There's a lot of emphasis, for instance, on art and literature, but not exactly on a technical science such as, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to be a museum curator? Are you going to make films?
A lot of colleges, like the one that I went to, was a big general education school, but they had a lot of really good specialty schools that actually had a lot of amazing teaching and different forms of education that weren't offered at a lot of the other general education schools. But that being said, I'd have amazing art classes and things like that, but then I would have really terrible math, science, English, basic classes that most colleges often give you. So the problem that comes with that is that a lot of those skills are the ones that you need in your general life going forward as an adult. And honestly, as one of the students of that school, I spent most of my time ignoring and just kind of getting through the class because it was so easy and the information was so textbook that it really didn't serve me later on in life.
Kind of have to be overeducated to be qualified for just about any job today. And so I think because of that, we have to spend a disproportionate amount of time with education that probably isn't being beneficial to your kind of like long-term career plans. Most of the time I spent in undergraduate learning stuff that, while useful at the time, I'm certainly not using in my day-to-day career now.
If I have tenure at a particular college and I'm not required to learn the new methodologies, I'll go with what I know because it's easier and faster. And it's sad because those people are in positions where the general perception of an academic is one who looks out for the well-being of the students. And when it requires that I admit that I don't know how to do certain things and that I need additional training that might not make me feel as smart as I'd like to feel, there's a behavioral issue in all of that. And unfortunately, it's the students in those kind of classes where they are working with, oh my God, pen and paper or pencil and paper doing accounting. That's medieval. I'm an accountant. I went to school to be an accountant. Prior generations that were taught accounting were taught to do the accounting on a green general ledger. You know, on one side of the books you'd have debits, and the other side you'd have credits, and everything was handwritten. And for the accounting field, at least educationally, it's pretty much the same way today. You don't work with computers that much at all. To get an accounting degree, you don't use Excel or any type of basic tools that you'd expect an accountant to use.
We have to figure out a way to bridge that gap. How do we bring some of those real-world key information pieces and strategies that we employ at our job, creative thinking, thinking outside the box. If you're learning information in one way in school and in college, and then you leave and you have to find a completely different way of operating, that's going to set you back. And it's also going to contribute to, you know, possible low self-esteem, feelings of being a failure, of not measuring up, and having to quickly try to figure out how to adjust.
Someone, even just a county away, is coming in with a totally different type of education than you're coming in with. And even different states have massively differing educational tools.
I also think traditional four-year education will also go through a series of innovations to try to be more relevant to this next generation and close the gap that exists between their expectations and the existing models of delivery.
Those schools that offer a better exposure to technology should have greater student demand. Those that don't adapt to those kind of things see the student demand go away, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see new waves. We've already seen a few in Chicago of late, colleges that don't make it anymore. If you spend an awful lot of money studying something that you want and you don't have a valuable asset in your repertoire afterwards, job skills, next step kind of plans, educational freedom can wind up being a real albatross, because if in fact you are paying for this with student loans, you will graduate with an awful lot of debt, which then limits your ability to go on to the next step and achieve whatever it is that you want.
Student debt shouldn't make you accrue so much that you have a hard time living outside of college. The fact that students are walking out sometimes with so much debt that they end up having to work 2 jobs just to cover it and aren't able to even find a job within their own field, that's a little ridiculous.
You know, you're thinking about, okay, do I want to pay off my loans? Do I want to put down a down payment for a house now? And you're facing all those things now, you know, at a young age when you're coming just out of college and having kind of unsure prospects in the future and trying to get your career started. So it's certainly something to have to balance.
The reality is, just getting a degree doesn't guarantee a job, and the federal government is not getting paid back like they used to. Default rates have gone up. So it's not just the banks that are seeing this, but the federal government has to get smarter about funding things that make sense. If you're fiscally responsible and you live at home for a couple of years, and you take public transportation, you won't be buying a new car. You won't be supporting the economy by buying a car. You won't be supporting the economy by taking a rental apartment someplace so the landlord will have demand for their facilities. But I worry that if a student graduates in their 20s and they wind up turning their 10-year intended payback into a 30-year payback because it's all they can afford, all you simply do is forego the unintended consequence of these people not being able to buy a home, not being able to go on to additional graduate school and get skills if they have the capabilities to do this, that you or somebody of the millennial ilk finishing up their student loan payments when they're in their 50s has an additional set of repercussions because saving for retirement will not have happened. until you're in your 50s. And if you don't start saving for retirement until your 50s, you may be one of those people chasing shopping carts or working at the Walgreens when you're in your 70s because you have no option.
The cost of a college degree in the United States has increased 1,200% over the past 30 years, far exceeding the price inflation of consumer goods, medical expenses, and food. In 1963, a student could reasonably work during summer break to afford school. We have come now to a point where a student would have to work a full-time minimum wage job for almost the entire calendar year to afford the average $14,000 per year tuition, and that's with zero living expenses, which means it's nearly impossible for any college student to attend a four-year school without taking out a student loan. The cost of college is rising faster than almost any other service. Meanwhile, the minimum wage hasn't even kept up with inflation. State legislators also cut education budgets, forcing public schools to raise tuition and students to take on more personal debt. In fact, while the cost of college has risen over 1,100% since 1978, state funding towards colleges has actually been cut 40%. Student loan debt has soared from $260 billion in 2004 to $1.2 trillion in 2014. Average debt jumped from $18,000 to $33,000, and the number of people over 60 with student loan debt tripled to 2.1 million.
And the people we really need to be worried about are not the four-year college graduates who are $28,000 in debt. It's the people who have high school or less and never got any more education beyond that because they believed they couldn't afford it, because they didn't know how to navigate the student loan system, because they had personal problems or family problems or mental health, physical health problems that prevented them from getting that education. Those are the people who are going to have difficulty finding a job, difficulty keeping a job, and difficulty ever making enough money to support themselves and a family. But if you have a four-year degree, over the course of a lifetime, compared to someone who has high school or less, you make an estimated $1 million more. Tell me something else that you can do with $28,000 right now that will be worth $1 million 40 years later. There isn't anything else.
When I look at it, I'm going to be making exponentially more until my retirement had I not got my degree. Do I think that the education system tries to squeeze as much as they can out of us? Yeah.
What are my options if in fact I take on this debt and I wind up having difficulties? And the more they ask those questions about what am I going to do, the more people I would hope would be thinking about how do we revise some of our old programs such that we can accommodate some of this. If you are going to college and borrowing a lot of money and you are going to go and get a degree that is in high demand and has high prospects for demand, for example, electrical engineering, I would argue that a student going into significant debt, getting a degree like that, probably is okay going into debt. But somebody who is going to college for, forgive me, liberal arts, if you're going to get an English degree or a journalism degree or a photography degree, those kind of people will spend lots of money, but they are the ones that are going to have very difficult time paying off those debts. Using that degree, they need to have a second game plan.
Out of all the optimistic graduates that finished their four-year program, only 27% will actually land a job that they earned a degree in. 47% of the working population own degrees, yet only 27% of employers require a college degree. And the future isn't looking too bright. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the demand for degrees will only increase 0.5% over the next 10 years. What happens when we see that our education doesn't work in the modern world? Well, I hope you're good at making coffee, because your local Starbucks is always looking for its next barista.
We had a group of millennials who were graduating college with debt in a perfect storm.
Right now, breaking news here, stocks all around the world are tanking because of the crisis on Wall Street.
We're down 1.7% here, a loss of 37 points.
We're down by between 3 and 4.5%. We're down over 16%. Dow at the same time has fallen about 18%, 21%,
43%. We're in the midst of a serious financial crisis, and the federal government is responding with decisive action.
How in the world can we find the billions of dollars that we're borrowing from China and Japan?
3 of America's 5 largest investment banks failed or have been sold off in distress.
The economy was in a money supply crisis. We had a housing crisis going on. We had stock market disruption going on. We had big bank conspiracy theories.
Thousands of people, including my own mother, would lose their jobs as the world fell into recession. The crash became an excuse for companies to move forward with cheaper technological changes, drastically reducing the need for a human labor force.
The old workers, they would go to their Ford assembly plant, their Chrysler assembly plant, and they would work at the same job for years upon years upon years. The steel workers in Gary, Indiana, they did the same job years upon years. The people who work at the BP refineries, they do the same jobs. Once technology gets involved, that ever-increasing hyper-competitiveness that business is now involved in simply comes back to those people who are in the workforce, and it's much more millennials these days.
We're constantly trying in this capitalistic society of America to find someone better for cheaper, and because of that type of mentality, lifelong work in a particular job market just doesn't exist in a good job.
Ronald Reagan's 1983 report, A Nation at Risk, came out and said that the burden of falling test scores rested upon the students and the teachers.
About 13% of our 17-year-olds are functional illiterates, and among minority youth, the rate is closer to 40%. The study indicates the quality of learning in our classrooms has been declining for the last 2 decades, a fact which won't surprise many parents or the students educated during that period. The National Commission for Excellence in Education recommends requiring 4 years of English in high school and 3 solid years each of math and science. Get a good education. That's the key to success.
Vocational and trade jobs became an afterthought, and now even skilled, hard labor is seen as undesirable when seeking higher education.
Nationwide, manufacturers say the lack of skilled workers is the reason for hundreds of thousands of unfilled jobs.
We can't find enough students who are interested in pursuing these trades.
He's part of a new generation of mechanics working to shake off old perceptions that auto shop is for students who can't succeed elsewhere.
But if you don't have an underlying appreciation for the work, if you're not talking about jobs that people affirmatively aspire to, you're going to be pushing the boulder up the hill.
In today's climate, 54% of millennials either want to start their own business or have already started one. Half of my generation has no desire to work blue-collar jobs, clocking in and out or paying union dues. It's estimated that throughout the next decade, over 300,000 jobs as electricians will open up as boomers retire. But nobody's pushing millennials to get educated in these workforce jobs, even if those jobs bring in more money than the ones of most recent college graduates.
I don't think there are any guarantees anymore. I mean, that's what makes modern life difficult. We have a lot of advantages. We're so much luckier than people 100 years or 200 years ago in the range of different kinds of satisfying work we can do.
Millennials are in a much more dynamic economic environment than any generation preceding them. They have to be more adaptable for change. They have to be more adept at accepting rejection and bad news, because those kind of things are more likely to happen at a much faster rate going forward.
These folks have been out of work 2 years, 3, even 4. They're college-educated professionals in their 40s or 50s, people who thought their company would take them all the way to retirement.
After about 20, 25 years, jobs start feeling like they either have to completely retrain their people or they have to actually hire a brand new staff just to keep up with the times.
Myself, having been in the financial services industry for 20 years, friends and I comment about the fact that 90% of the people that we knew that were in that industry aren't in it anymore because technology has made those jobs go away. The millennial generation is much more technology sophisticated than any generation before, and chasing shopping carts or working the register at the Walgreens, scanning a few things, probably doesn't interest them as much as doing other things that have a technology influence.
There's a lot of frustration and depression and anxiety over not getting where you want to get fast enough. Maybe you wanted to get this degree in something that it turned out you couldn't do well or you couldn't afford. Maybe you got the degree and you couldn't find a job in the field. Or maybe you got the degree and you find a job, it turned out you didn't like it after all. I've heard all those stories. Then if you rely on trying to become the 1 in a million, 1 in a billion, who's the next Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, who all dropped out of college and all became fabulously successful, it's like getting struck by lightning. You can't count on that either.
Even with the constantly changing economy and job market, productivity is on the rise. Productivity is defined as the amount of essential goods and services being created. Over the last 50 years, the numbers have steadily climbed up with no significant falters.
Business investment in gear, in equipment, and hardware and software is at an all-time high. So the businesses are getting out their checkbooks. What they're not really doing is hiring.
All of our needs to survive are met at an increasingly efficient rate, despite any employment or economic issues.
You had complaints throughout the 20th century of how machines were taking jobs that people used to do and what a bad thing this was and how this was going to result in massive unemployment.
We see time and again where companies that are addressing need states taking share from old, mature, iconic brands. The biggest movie company in America is probably Netflix today, and they didn't exist a couple decades ago. And one of the biggest stay options for people traveling today is Airbnb. The taxi companies had a virtual monopoly on getting people from point A to point B, and we see plenty of people using alternatives like Uber and Lyft and others.
Look how fast everybody is looking forward to the new revs of software, whether it's Microsoft Office, whether it's the next rev of Facebook, whether it's a new Twitter upgrade. All of those things are coming at a faster pace than used to be the norm, because if you don't do it and you are Google or Microsoft or whomever, somebody else will.
When it comes to millennials at work, they have some different expectations. They're looking for more feedback. That doesn't mean they don't want coaching or whatnot. They just want feedback opportunities. So instead of annual reviews, you might look at quarterly check-ins. Millennials, if they can, want to have some flexibility in their schedules. That doesn't mean they don't want to work hard. They just want to be able to balance other things going on in their lives. Maybe they want to be able to get into work early, leave a little bit early, or get in late and leave late, or work from home from time to time because they're trying to take care of some other stuff. I can have a head of data strategy who lives in Richmond, Virginia, as opposed to living here, and we do. So I think that's going to continue to evolve, and also the comfort factor probably will evolve as people are more able to measure the quality of a contribution versus time. I tend to encourage employers to look at outputs, not time clocks. Obviously, if you're in a business where you need a group of people to be there at 8 o'clock in order to start a production line, that's a different scenario. But there are an awful lot of millennials working in white-collar jobs who have expectations that they'll be treated fairly, they'll be treated as adults, and they really do care about working.
You have aspirations for finding some kind of work that's not just drudgery, even well-paid drudgery, but will be personally satisfying and something you look forward to doing every day. That's still hard to find. That's always going to be hard to find. You have to make a life for yourself in a way that your great-great-grandparents 100 years ago may not have had to.
I'm gonna have 10 jobs in my lifetime, 20 jobs in my lifetime. Not, I'm going to work for big company X and I'm gonna stay there for the next 40 years. They're confident that they can always find something, whether it's in a traditional corporate environment or whether it's freelancing, and the freelance economy is certainly vibrant for many millennials.
Within 5 years, it's going to be my work record that people rely on, as opposed to my education. The education is what gets you presumably into your first job, maybe your second job. Once you've had 5 or 10 years under your belt, the education is, I would argue, of less interest to people. It's of interest, but it's no longer as relevant as what have you done in your prior jobs.
Even with the technological changes of the past 25 to 50 years, which have been enormous, the unemployment rate now is 4.9%. For people with a college education, it's even lower. It's under 3%. So yeah, a lot of jobs have been eliminated by technology, and new ones are created all the time.
We entered adulthood during a crisis, but are still trying new ways to move towards a sustaining economy. Online check-ins at hotels, ordering food from tablets rather than cashiers, and buying groceries with a self-checkout machine only points towards the overall workforce becoming even more automated.
Our generation is going to have to deal with tens of millions of jobs replaced by automation like self-driving cars and trucks. But we have the potential to do so much more than that.
The problems I've been showing you are the problems of my generation, but the events of today have been in motion for nearly a century. What previous generations forget is that the burdens and unfamiliar trends are reborn with each upbringing in a vastly different world.
We have a theory here of a cyclical pattern of child nurture and coming-of-age experience, which explains, we believe, a lot about why American history fluctuates back and forth, for instance, between periods of national emergency and periods of spiritual awakening.
A generation reaches its apex of influence when it moves into midlife and begins to take leadership positions within society. Every 20 years or so, a new generation climbs to the midlife rung of the age ladder, and the generation that previously occupied that rung moves into retirement, and the mood of the culture shifts. This cycle is apparent in how each generation has viewed and treated succeeding generations.
Don't think you have a corner on all of virtue vision in the country, or that everybody else is fat and selfish and you're the first generation to come along that's felt dissatisfied. They all have, you know, about different things, and most of them didn't have the same opportunity and freedoms that you do.
And your folks didn't understand?
They never do. If you watch television at prime times, advertising is not concerned about poverty, not concerned about race oppression, not concerned about the police, but the biggest problem is your hair groomed and what's it like under your arms? I think that a generation of kids which says we don't care about your concepts of cleanliness is a revolutionary generation.
I mean, it's real hard to be free when you are bought and sold in the marketplace.
The first car we slammed was a Range Rover, then the second one was a BMW, and then at the end here, it's a new Volkswagen Bug. We felt like the Volkswagen Bug was a perfect example of our generation having 60s youth culture marketed to us as something we should aspire to.
What is it that you want from me, huh? What is it? You want me to get a job on the line for the next 20 years until I'm granted leave with my gold-plated watch and my balls full of tumors because I surrendered the one thing that means shit to me? Well, honey, you can just exhale because it's not going to happen, not in this lifetime.
The 20-somethings who were first up the me generation were not the millennials, but the baby boomers. Trends focusing on self-improvement, social revolutions, and personal freedoms were looked down by the silent generation who fought in the war. The silent generation was known for keeping their feelings to themselves, keeping their head down, going to work, and providing for their families. When the baby boomers began to question their predecessors and start searching for self-exploration, they were ostracized by the silent generation.
Nowadays, everybody's got to go to shrinks and counselors and go on Sally Jesse Raphael and talk about their problems. Whatever happened to Gary Cooper, the strong, silent type?
It is time for an honest look at the problem of order in the United States. Dissent is a necessary ingredient of change. But in a system of government that provides for peaceful change, there is no cause that justifies resort to violence.
It began a year ago when the so-called free speech advocates, who in truth have no appreciation for freedom, were allowed to assault and humiliate the symbol of law and order, a policeman on the campus.
All my life, I've felt like somebody's wife or somebody's mother or somebody's daughter. Even all the time we were together, I never knew who I was.
This used to be a hell of a good country. Amen. All we represent to them, man, is somebody who needs a haircut. Oh, no. What you represent to them is freedom.
It gave people a sense of generational solidarity and a sense that they were different, and a sense different from the rest of the country, different from any other generation in American history. that they were in some ways special and blessed, and it gave them a sense of being embattled.
As the baby boomers reached adulthood, their children would become Generation X. Generation X was one of the first generations to take a hold of emerging electronic technology to create the tech world as we know today. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple all rose from the re-emerging hippie sensibilities. The entrepreneurial spirit and desire to break away from the norm led to changing the world of communication and information. In 1987, the stock market crashed. People that were in college during that time entered an economy that was in shambles.
It should be the best time of their lives, but today's young people graduate wearing a negative label before they've had a chance to make their own mark.
Sociologists call you Generation X. But I believe that giving up is a grave and tragic error.
The lost generation, it's called.
They think we're lost, but we're just trying to find something better and new.
We don't have a war. We don't have a depression. We don't have legalized discrimination. We don't have these horrendous and totally visible and identifiable challenges to face.
These now directionless kids were called lazy and apathetic, reluctant to grow up. The nickname given to this group of people was slackers.
I would say a lot of them, they have jobs, but the main point I wanted to stress that their jobs weren't their whole life. That's not how they define themselves. Oh, I'm a waitress. Oh, I'm a, it wasn't that. It was, oh, I'm just a person, or I'm a musician, I'm a writer, I'm a filmmaker, whatever. That's how they're just a thinking person. They're not a worker.
Instead of being glued to the phones, slackers were glued to their video games. They were the apathetic youth who were cynical and uninterested in political or social causes. Films such as Clerks and Slacker would later come around to define and capitalize on this stigma. Richard Linklater, director of the aforementioned 1991 film, commented on the term's meaning in an interview, stating that, "I think the cheapest definition of a slacker would be someone who's just lazy, hanging out and doing nothing. I like to change that to somebody who's not doing what's expected of them. Somebody who's trying to live an interesting life, doing what they want to do, and if that makes time to find it, then so be it." These are the same things that are being said about our generation. Instead of being glued to video games, we're glued to our phones, always taking selfies, narcissistic, lazy, entitled, and highly opinionated. This is the stigma that has been passed down from generation to generation. We are a population coping with dangerous levels of stress, stagnation, and limited resources to address suicide risk factors. Over the course of the past decade, suicide rates have inched higher, following a decrease the decade before. The point is, we were all called names and ridiculed for being young. We all brought a swift and unforeseen change in society to our frightened appearance. The issues that plague us today, depression, disenfranchisement, and being left behind by an ever-changing world, these issues affect people from every generation. It's when we look past the blanket image of young people disrupting the world that we see that we're all just looking for the same thing. We want to be happy, we want to be successful, and we want to be free in the ways that we wish.
I don't know. I want it to be...
To be what?
Different.
We're all worried. We're all in pain. I mean, it's time. It begins with us, not with politicians, the experts, or the teachers, but with us.
So what's the point?
Or what?
I don't know any of this. Everything.
Everything? What's the point? I mean, I sure as shit don't know. I mean, but neither does anybody else, okay? We're all just winging it, I mean, the good news is you're feeling stuff.
Everyone was young and full of opinions, some valid and some wishful thinking. Let's break the cycle of seeing change as a negative and embrace our differences to survive a chaotic world. Let love reign supreme.